Hi guys, how are you? Hope you're doing well. Hope you're all safe and secure. Welcome to my house, and like the office, it's also black. Most things are. But yeah, I'm gonna chat to you tonight about debt counseling. What it is, how does it work? Try and answer a lot of the questions and queries we've been getting on Facebook and on my WhatsApp. Um, does it really benefit? How soon is the results? That kind of stuff. I think in this day, especially what's happening now, debt counseling is a very practical, real solution that people should be considering. And I'm just trying to sell debt counseling. Hopefully, answer a lot of queries and try and add value and clear up any confusion that people have about what it actually is and how does it work. Most will know that I'm an attorney. I am the founder and principal attorney of TPA Legal, and I'm also a debt counselor. So I'm an attorney for about 20 years. 20 years is that long. And a debt counselor for about 10. So the reason I say that is that you can get some perspective as to the length of time and hence the experience and relative to what I'm about to say. But I'm not here to sell the practice or debt counseling. I'm here to sell debt counseling, to enlighten you about debt counseling. Well, debt counseling in a nutshell is when people are over indebted. They're spending most or all of their income on their credit accounts. So, as an example, if for example someone's making or a household's getting about 5,000 Rand and say about 4,000 of that is going towards paying credit expenses, and they left with very little to no money for their own living expenses, then they are over indebted. That household and that family is over indebted. And the reality before COVID-19, before this virus, you had as a very conservative figure, approximately 65%, an estimated figure of people, consumers that are over indebted. And that is a substantially high number. In terms of the number, from a worldwide perspective, that's one of the highest in the world of its population that are actually over indebted. That figure must certainly exponentially increase now with this virus. And understand that most households have more than one income as a source. So you'd have a father, mother, grandfather, something. You have more than one person from that household that is employed. With the estimated thousands of people that are going to become unemployed, unfortunately, the reality is that households are going to go from having multiple incomes to maybe one income or just a few. So all of the expenses for the household will remain, but the income to pay for those expenses will diminish. So that's going to put the households, the families, the children at quite an inconvenience, if not at real risk of legal action. And whilst now legal action will be pended, there are measures in place not to do, well, this is only the fourth week. That's not going to last forever. So at some point in time, in our very near future, you're going to have people that simply cannot take advantage or optimize the other relief packages that may be there, either a payment holiday, because that's temporary, even a reduction. You're simply going to have people that cannot continue to commit to those kind of monthly payments that are necessary, while still trying to balance on one hand the family's living expenses. And by living expenses, we're not talking about holidays, we're talking about luxurious entertainment, etc. We're talking about very basic necessities so that they can have a very decent quality of life. And that's not going to be realistic to maintain both. And accordingly, you're going to have an overwhelming number, portion of the population that's going to be in default. And once you're in default, legal action ensues. And anybody that has been involved in legal action would know firsthand, one, how expensive it is, two, the real risks. So once you're involved in that, you now have costs on a very higher scale. You are now liable for interest at a higher prescribed rate, and just the very results of litigation can be devastating. You can have repossessions, you can have sales and executions, and once that cycle starts, understand that the moment litigation starts, or just before it starts, you are adversely listed on the credit bureau, which means you cannot access any more credit. So if you're trying to even get very basics, I'm not talking buying cars, etc. I'm saying if you wanted to rent new property, you can't do that. Once you start to have judgments, certain employers from now on don't hire people that have judgments. It starts to close in on you, and it's very methodical, and the results limit you going forward. So it's something that must be avoided. Litigation, as far as possible, you want to avoid it. So most people are fearful for debt counseling for a reason I can't really explain. The name debt counseling, people have this fear that it's a blacklisting of some kind, and it's a stigma, and there's no real truth to it. I mean, there's no justification in the belief that you're being judged for this. Understand the reasons for debt counseling, and understand the reasoning why people become over indebted. It's not because they have been overly they've been reckless with their monies and gambling and abusing it in some fashion. More often than not, and for the majority of cases, you have people falling into debt simply because life happens. And by life happening, talking about an unexpected medical emergency, you have to pay for it. It's not provided for, but it has to be paid. So somehow the family becomes indebted simply because of this. You have divorces. We have one of the highest divorce rates in the world. It's also a stat that's not very proud of, but it is a reality. And when households split, expenses increase. We have education expenses. We have one of the highest in unemployment. All these factors contribute to it. And we have what I refer to as the South African black tax, which simply means we take care of our extended family's problems. We make that our problem. So when somebody in the family is in need of something, we take on that burden, that financial burden, and that eats into our costs. And as a consequence of all of these factors, we only can borrow more monies for a very short time. Most South Africans end up actually using short-term loans just to get by. It's just there for the month to month. You're literally paying for the month's expenses on credit, and that's just completely unsustainable. What debt counseling does is it basically reduces the payment. So your creditors end up getting paid between 40 and 60% less. Now that reduction is that saving is what you then would use for your household expenses, for your living expenses, and those are the reasonable living expenses. This is not some sort of additional savings plan. This is a means by which through debt counseling you reduce your expenses on one hand, and that amount you then use for improving your family life and the other living expenses. And remember, debt counseling is for a very short time. You're looking at between 2 and 5 years. There has to be with debt counseling a time in which it ends. What debt counseling does is during that period that you are under debt counseling, your assets are secure. The sheriff's not going to knock at your door, and you're not going to get these harassing calls. Your vehicles are not going to be repossessed. Your house is not at risk. You are protected. And that's the purpose of debt counseling, to give you that protection that you need for a very temporary period while you get back on your feet. And I think now more than ever, this is exactly what South Africa needs. And through the debt counseling process, when you see someone, a competent debt counselor, they're going to go through your expenses and your accounts, and they're going to determine which of those accounts are in fact reckless. And what the word reckless means is it's reckless credit. Certain times and some credit providers may not have done their due diligence or their proper assessment when they gave you credit. In other words, they didn't check to see, can you really afford to pay this back? And many can relate to being offered loans that they've never applied for, getting calls to say, well, we can give you this finance, not really checking to see if in fact, can that person afford it? And most people who then take it feel horrendous to ask for help and don't know of the fact that that was reckless credit in the first instance. And through reckless credit, if there is finding of reckless credit, then that account does not have to be paid. But you have to see a competent debt counsel or attorney to determine if that transaction is in fact an unlawful transaction. And that's part of the debt review process. So it's advisable for people, when they're looking at all of these options that are going to be coming up right now in the next few weeks to come, is to consider what is debt counseling and how debt counseling can help, and whether debt counseling would be the most viable option. Because at the end of the day, you want to select the most appropriate decision and the most appropriate option, and that's what informed decisions are all about, so that you've gotten the advice of competent, experienced people to tell you that given your circumstances, given your family's assets, and given your income, the best approach would be to do X, Y, and Z, which likely would be debt counseling. And it is a bit abstract when people say, we can save you money, we can save you between 40 and 60%. If you want a free assessment done, just give us a shout. It's literally a very simple process. We take your ID number, we do a search on the credit bureau, we find exactly what your accounts are. Once you punch in your ID number, you get a full printout of your entire credit worth. So whatever financial transactions you're in comes up on there. You know your installments, we know what's in arrears, we know how much it's in arrears from, if they are in arrears. And looking at these amounts that you're supposed to pay, we're able to work out to the cent what we can as a minimum initially reduce it by. And when you have that comparison, you then can see firsthand how this would benefit you. Understand that the relief from debt counseling is immediate. It's not something that would come at some distant, uncertain date in the future. Debt counseling, once you start the process, the relief is immediate. So that month you feel the relief in terms of how much you're supposed to pay to your creditors. But in essence, my advice is that in this uncertain time, get some certainty. At least when it comes to your own work, when it comes to your own assets, when it comes to your own lifestyle and those that are dependent on you, get an informed decision. Understand what the process is, understand what is the best option, and so that you could make the most informed decision ultimately for yourself and those that depend on you. Because going forward in this uncertain time, you want certainty. You want to know that your assets, your livelihood, your quality of life has been preserved. And while we get through this, the least of your concerns going forward is whether your house is going to be sold, or whether your car is going to be possessed, or whether. So you want that certainty. If you have any queries, give us a call and we'll try and help you. I hope there was some value there, and just take care, be safe, and we'll get through this.